Hey guys, what's going on? Just wanted to sort of explain what's sort of going on. Obviously, no guests this week. Just everything's probably getting a little bit hectic in terms of the season starting, and obviously a lot of guys are just coming back from Darwin with chariots. I do have a bunch lined up with guys and girls. Just the whole part of them sort of coming back from Darwin. Obviously, generally I film on Sundays as well. I still work a full-time job doing this. It's not like this is paying the bills in any shape whatsoever. So generally sort of Sundays are the day, and yeah, unfortunately just things didn't line up this week, especially being Father's Day. Yeah, it's just is what it is. But yeah, obviously I've got a whole heap lined up in South Australia, Adelaide sort of area, and I've got a bunch lined up interstate too. It's just the matter of the financials getting interstate and the time off work to travel and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I don't want to harp on it, but yeah, it's not paying the bills kind of thing to go and do it. It's costing me a lot of money to do it. There's a lot of money's been invested into this already, and yeah, in the upcoming season, I'm planning on going to the track and doing a lot more stuff at the track. Obviously, there's a few things happening in the background with all of that. Going through all the proper channels to be able to do all that sort of stuff. I don't want to just rock up to the track and start filming, and yeah, it's sort of not the way things go, surprisingly to some people. Yeah, obviously a few close family and friends know there's a few dramas going on with all that at the moment. I don't really want to elaborate on that at this current time. But yeah, there's obviously there's a whole bunch of people behind me that are supporting me, which is like unreal. And then yeah, there's just a few other things going on which it doesn't make sense to me, especially with where like races and people within the industry are asking me to do certain things, and then yeah, just those other parts of the industry are it's confusing, but yeah, I'll just leave it at that for the moment. So yeah, hopefully in the next week or so I should be putting a bit of a schedule together for what our travel will be coming up. Obviously want to hit a lot of the big events that I can, try and get around as much as possible. So yeah, I'll obviously be calling on a lot of favours with friends and stuff like that to, try and crash at their place or something like that. Try and limit the costs as much as possible for myself while still trying to get this done. I know one thing that we've already got planned, not 100% on the media clearance there, but yeah, we're going to the Classic. I know that for sure. I spoke with Michael Parry the other day, and yeah, should be all good to go there. So looking forward to that. It's obviously the pinnacle event in Australia. Not taking away from the Australian title whatsoever, but yeah, it's just the event that the Classic is. So yeah, hopefully it's all good. We'll be there. That's not so much of a holiday this year. That'll be more of a working holiday. So yeah. And then basically the other reason why I wanted to do this one sort of solo this week, still want to be putting out content as much as possible, and I never really explained in the beginning like what my intentions were with this. I personally haven't ever raced. I've crewed for a lot of guys. I've had some great chats with people, and a few people probably know like who I had those chats with and stuff like that. Yeah, I had a really good chat with a promoter this year, and I just it just tweaked to me like, hey, I need to record that or something like that. And then probably it was Easter time. Luckily, Troy Jordan, he had Michael Pickens come over and race for him, and I'm lucky enough to crew for the Jordan boys. and we're on the rain delay, and me and Michael just sat at the back of the truck and just spoke for like 2 hours. And essentially it was just a podcast that just didn't get recorded. And that's when, later on that night we had another rain delay, and I was talking to Troy, and I said, oh, this is my idea. I want to do a Speedway podcast. And he said, go do it, go buy the gear, do what you got to do, get it done. And that's pretty much where I started. Started hounding people, like probably before buying all the gear. I bought like most of the gear, and then started like just wanted to get an idea on who would be keen for it and stuff like that. Super grateful that Matt Eagle took the punt and let me do him first, probably not knowing what it was going to look like or sort of be like in terms of production and stuff like that. From the get-go, I wanted this to be like as best quality as I possibly can. I didn't want this to be just like some guy filming with his phone or anything like that. Or I don't ever want to do like Zoom style podcasts. It's just not my thing. Like I'm not claiming to be the greatest podcaster out there or anything like that. That's just not my intentions with it. I just don't feel like you have a connection in conversation with it. Like all the conversations that I've done in the podcast, you pick up on things like body language and stuff like that. You sort of know to steer around certain topics as such, or you can tell that someone's not feeling that or something. So I just feel like you're not going to pick that up on a Zoom style podcast. So that's just not where I want to head with it. I'm not saying that I'll never not do it. Like obviously, if this ever gets to the point where I can have some stupidly big name in the sport, then I'll probably will go down that road. Obviously, I don't really want to. That's not the sort of the look that I'm going for in general. So I pretty much wanted this to be the best possible like style podcast that there is for Speedway, especially. I bought, as far as top of the line gear goes, as much as like my budget possibly would let me. So the gear should sort of sort me out for like a long time. Obviously, one of the things I have like sort of heard is the whole twin camera thing. It's like just at this point in time for the budget, like I can't, to go spend another couple of grand on another camera to do the twin style podcast is it's just not a viable option at this point in time. It is something that I wanted to do, but at the same time too, though, I sort of wanted the thing to have the feel of like, for people who are in Speedway, you probably would have sat on the sort of sideline there to conversations with drivers and someone before. So I sort of wanted that feel of it, that you're on the sideline looking at the conversation. Whereas sometimes I think, having watched like those twin camera style podcasts, it's a bit choppy and changey, and it gets a bit more actiony than what the conversation is about compared to what I feel like the way that I'm doing it single camera. So we'll see. Not saying that it won't happen, but if the budget allows for it. Obviously that's the other thing, like the YouTube's not making any money at all. Like you need 1,000 subscribers before you even make any money, and obviously I think I'm at like 80 or something like that. So that's got a hell of a long way to go before it even starts to make money. And then some of the stuff too that I've seen people saying that they do get to that 1,000 subscribers and then X amount of views. Like some people are making like $6 a month off of YouTube. Obviously, we all know there's a shitload of people who make a living out of YouTube, but you got to look at their subscriber count and their views. Like they're literally in the millions, sort of thing. I know that this podcast is never going to get that because how small Speedway in Australia is. So it's definitely a passion project for sure. Obviously, we'll see where the content goes in terms of what's going to happen at the track. It's not going to be anything like Sprint Car Hub style stuff. I'll just say that from the get-go. I don't want to encroach on his sort of stuff either. He's got his lane, and I'm more than respectful of that. I obviously don't want anything to sort of go on there in terms of that sort of stuff. I've got heaps of respect for what Toby's doing with all that sort of stuff. It's once you start actually doing this sort of stuff for yourself and you see how much goes into the editing and the like logistics and stuff like that too, it's there's so much goes into it, more than what you'll sort of ever realise, and that's And I definitely bit off more than I can chew there with the computer side of stuff here. Like, I can sit down and talk shit about racing till the cows come home, no dramas. But in terms of the putting it into the computer and editing it and all that sort of stuff, definitely getting better at it. I know the first few couple of podcasts were a bit shaky with the audio and that sort of stuff, but yeah, I'm trying my utmost best to get it as best as possible. I definitely want it on that sort of, if you've ever seen like Bloke in a Bar podcast type stuff, definitely get it to that spec of stuff. That's where I want it to be. So the pit stuff that I'm sort of proposing to do will just be more like quicker interview type stuff after races, not anything like super long, in depth, just more of an opportunity for guys to speak like post race, get their sponsors out there a little bit more. Probably one of the biggest things that one of the other reasons why I started this is I've sort of seen Speedway on a downhill incline over the last few years. And I think a part of the problem with that is we came from such a high with the USC stuff. Like, USC was just killing it. We had those nights with sprint cars, late models and speed cars, midgets. And, I think coming off such a big high with all that sort of stuff, that some people have said to me that like maybe Speedway's not dying, but we just had it so good there for that run that it's not quite at that level anymore, which that is obviously a possibility as well. So I just want to see the sport grow. For me, I don't understand bitumen racing. I can't sit and watch a V8 supercar race. It just does absolutely nothing for me. Whereas Speedway is just so entertaining. Like, once you can start picking up on things like the tracks changing over the night or even a feature, and you don't get that in bitumen racing. And if you've ever actually been to a V8 supercar race, I know from like personal experience, I'm not saying that they're all like this, but I know, and I spoke about it with Daryl Sloan. Like, we used to go to the Clipsal here in Adelaide, and we had front row start finish line tickets. So the start of the race, no matter what the category was great. Then they'd go to that first corner and you look up at the big screen and you watch the big screen until they come back to the last corner and you'd watch them race past. And then, with the V8 supercars, because they raced so long compared to all the other classes, you just end up watching the screen and there's no one to really sort of follow because they all start getting sort of spread out. Whereas in like, watching Speedway, especially once you start getting in tune to it, you can be watching 4 or 5 races happening within that race at a time because you can see the whole track, or you can keep an eye on the leader, and you might see someone starting to come through the field. Like, one of the guys I used to watch all the time, Stephen Lyons. I was never massive Stephen Lyons fan, and if he's starting 10th in a feature, I was never like worried because you could see him coming through the pack, and that like those last 10 laps, he's going to be at the pointy end because that's where he set the car up. Whereas you're never going to see that kind of stuff in V8 supercars. So, yeah, rambling, I know, but back to one of my things was just trying to bring people into Speedway who, like, those people who sit on the seat of like, oh, we should go one night, and don't. Like, I've said it before, like, obviously Speedway City's gone, but if we still had Speedway City around, probably for 95% of the meetings that they've got on for the season, my money was guaranteed at the gate. So to me, that's not money that the promoter needed to worry about. They need to bring in that casual fan, or that fan who's just, on the fence, or they might go 2 or 3 times a year and they and ah about it. Whereas if we can try and get that person to come in the gate, that's the kind of money that we need to bring into the sport. Whereas, yeah, you just see week after week, it's just the diehards, like, and I think it was Daryl once again. I said to him, like, the classic, that's 8,000 diehards. There's no casual fans going to that, and obviously, I understand too. There's limits on the seating and stuff like that too. There, that is jam packed to the hill, quite literally that place. So I get that. So yeah, I just and you see all this stuff too in vet supercars. Like, people are turning away from it. They're over all the the so-called parody of it and all that sort of stuff. So it's like, for me, it seems like a great time that Speedway could jump on top of a bunch of people who are obviously racing fans and try and convert them. But yeah, it just seems like it's a very hard thing to do. Me and Jack spoke about it. Like, people think that we're just like hillbillies sitting on the hill drinking beer, like yahooing on, and it's like, it's not the case at all. You know, there's probably a couple of teams in Australia in sprint cars who would, you know, as far as an operation goes, would be rivaling some of the lesser vet supercar teams, or, you know, I can guarantee you some of the workshops would be better than some of the workshops for the Super 2 cars and stuff like that. So, you know, we're not just some hillbilly bogans out there racing in the dirt. It's so much more than that. And that's where the passion for me, trying to get people into the sport and carried over and stuff, is just, yeah, it's frustrating. Trying to educate people on it. And yeah, like, really my main hope for this was like, maybe someone watches a podcast and then they come to the track. Like, that's, you know, pretty much all that I sort of wanted from it, really. Like, if someone, you know, if I ever get to that point where someone comes up to me and says like, hey, I'm here because of you, like, that's, you know, job's achieved kind of thing. So yeah, probably just touching back on like sort of my beginnings with it. Obviously my family, like, I don't know, probably all of them Speedway diehards. Pretty much as a kid, like, all of my so-called like holidays as a kid, they were all Speedway related. They're or just, you know, might be on holiday, but just happens to be a sprint car race on nearby as well, something like that. So the rest of the Jordan side of the family, they all race Speedway bikes. Guys up in Darwin, they would have known my Uncle Geordie. He was heavily involved in Northline Speedway there, and the drags and stuff like that. He's a life member there and all that sort of stuff. So everyone up there, they would have known Geordie. He was a referee in bikes and all that sort of stuff too. So yeah, obviously I never raced or anything like that. I first started crewing for my mate Chris Hayden in his modified sedan, and then ventured into a few other little bits and pieces that, yeah, I'll just leave it at that. And then obviously lucky enough with the Jordan Bros to crew for them, help them out like wherever possible kind of thing. Travelled around a fair bit the last 12 months with that. Hit about, I think, like 9 or 10 races, and luckily enough, I was able to like hang out with teammates and stuff like that. You know, he was another one. Just had a great chat with him away from the track. Like, super normal dude. He's just, you know, racing for him is going to work the way that, you know, we go to work kind of thing. And then obviously had some great chats with Hayden Williams as well. He's like absolute ripper of a bloke. You know, he's funny, absolutely funny little bugger. And then, yeah, probably one of the greatest chats that I've just had, like, outright with anyone ever was Michael Pickens at Murray Ridge. He was, hopefully one day if he comes back, I can sit down and do a pod with him or something like that, or, you know, if I can get the funds up, I'll go across and have a chat to him, because, yeah, I've heard some podcasts with him too, and, like, I think I probably got, like, a little bit more out of him. Like, maybe that was just the setting, I don't know. So, you know, that was, that's probably, like, sort of the extent of my racing. Obviously, like, I've watched the absolute shitload of racing over the years, whether that's in person or on the streaming services. Like, pretty much, yeah, nearly every sort of Saturday morning, Sunday morning is devoted to watching Flow. Like I've said before, I'm an absolute fiend for non-wing sprint cars. I think that they put on the best racing in Speedway. Just, like, sometimes a winged race can just, they just hammer down and then that's it. Like, the leader's in front, whereas, like, even when the track is like that for non-wings, there's still, like, 10 lead changes, or, you know, like, just the sliders and stuff like that you see. It's just, there's so much going on. And then, obviously, sort of anyone who's been listening knows that I froth on Silver Crown cars as well. So, yeah, I was too busy this morning to watch the Silver Crown race, unfortunately, but I'll watch that later. Yeah, that is something that I'd love to bring to Australia, is Silver Crowns. I don't know, you'd obviously have to build a track from scratch, because generally, they race on the mile sort of track, so there's nothing here. I think there's a couple of tracks in WA that are like 560 metres, but yeah, that's still sort of, that's literally like, well, I don't even think that's half a mile, because I think a mile is 1.2k, I think, so, I'd obviously love to see Silver Crowns here, but I can't see that sort of ever happening, taking off. And to be honest too, I don't think we need another category of speedway. That's something that's been spoken about by a few other people. We do have a lot of categories in the sport, and that's something that comes back to the thing on the night. I think as like full-blown real race fans, we don't want to see 8 categories of racing, but then to get the casual punter in, I think that's what we need as well. So it's a hard one, like, promoting is just, you're in a really hard spot there. Like, you gotta keep the racers happy, which, to some degree you're never ever going to do, and then you need to bring the fans in, keep the fans happy, and especially in the way that definitely our attention spans are getting shorter and shorter. So you need to have something happening on track to keep the fans there. And that's one of the challenges of Speedway too, is, we understand as legitimate race fans as to why the grade is coming out, but to a casual fan, they're not going to have any concept as to what's going on there, sort of thing. And that's the other hard thing too, to try and, everyone talks about trying to broadcast Speedway on free to air, and it's got its own challenges in itself. Like, it's a long night, and I know that footy's long and stuff like that too, but and I'm a massive rugby fan, so I'll sit there and watch a rugby game, no worries, or some nights watch back-to-back games, and it's like, if you sit there and really watch the broadcast, there's always something happening. Like, even during an injury time break or something like that, they're showing you replays. So your brain's focused, you're watching something. It's not like, you're not just sitting there panning the camera on 15, 20 players just sitting there and sucking on the water bottles. It's like they realise that there's nothing happening, bang, it goes into a replay or something like that. So, you've got to do all that sort of stuff in Speedway, and it's just an extremely hard thing to try and broadcast. For the guys who watch the streams and stuff of World of Outlaws or any of the USAC stuff, we know what we're getting in for, because we're paying for that. So we know what's going to happen on any given night. And obviously, I know the stuff in America too, for whatever reasons, very, very, very rarely do they ever touch a track over there, or do they have a break in anything like that. But even I've sat there and watched some of the streams from America, and there's been massive breaks in the race night. Like, it's not always just, they've just run a show flat out and done. It's like, for whatever reason, there's been breaks in the show, and, sometimes they go around roving and talk to the drivers in the pits and that sort of stuff too. So it's not always necessarily the case over there. So I would love to see Speedway on free-to-air TV in Australia, but it's a very, very hard thing to do. I think, even just as a sport, I think we need to be a bit more polished before we could get to that level. It's just, and at the same time too, though, one of the beauties is that some of the characters in the game are a bit rough around the edges, but I don't know, it's just an extremely hard thing to try and do, and I don't know. At the same time too, though, we need to get those people to the track more so than getting it on free to air. Maybe we need to grow it to the point where speedways are packing out every night before we keep harping on this thing about getting it on free to air TV. Obviously, we've had some great luck in the sport of recent with what 7mate was doing with Perth. Perth is just killing it on so many fronts with what they're doing. It's just, I don't know. yes, their way of thinking over there seems to be they're just doing everything they can to make the sport bigger and bigger, and yeah, it's just, I don't know, unreal. And then even like stuff like chariots too, like, you know, there would be so much money lost by them not charging the fee for you to watch pay-per-view, and instead they put it out for free, and, you know, you watch 3 or 4 nights of racing for free to try and grow it. You know, I know for me, I think I'm sure a bunch of other people too, it's probably worked out for them in the long run, because we'll probably look at going up there next year for chariots. So after watching it for free, I think that's the second year I've watched it for free. So it's like now, yeah, in theory, pending the dates and all that sort of stuff, they'll get my money trackside. It's sort of paying off for them. So hopefully they keep going with that sort of initiative. Obviously anyone who follows like my socials would have known I was like sharing the shit out of it to try and get, you know, people to, you know, sit down and watch it with friends who aren't sort of necessarily interested in it. Yeah, it's just, I don't know, they're just, some of those like promoter groups are just absolutely killing it, and then, yeah, there's just other stuff going on in the sport, which is just, it's sort of mind-boggling. Anyone involved knows what's going on, and obviously the rumour mills run flat out with all that sort of stuff going on. You know, it's just, I don't know, it's probably not ever going to go away in the sport. Yeah. And, you know, at the same time too, I'm not saying that I want to be a promoter. I honestly have not got a clue in what goes on into doing it. You know, not saying that I would never not do it. I think it's like, you know, like most people, you've got your own ideas and stuff like that too. You think you know what's best for it, but at the end of the day, a promoter group, they're there to make money, and if they're not making money, then there's no one there to put the shows on and stuff like that too. So, you know, like we were really lucky here in Adelaide at one point when we had Speedway City and Murray Bridge, so had 2 tracks within an hour of each other from like where I live. So that's probably sort of the general radius for most people who live in Adelaide. But yeah, Murray Bridge is, I think it's like an hour and 10 away from Adelaide, depending on where you're at, and then depending on what end of the city you lived in, yeah, Speedway City might be 10 minutes away, or might be an hour away. So, and then yeah, now we got nothing, and it's you know, everyone bagged the piss out of that promoter out there, and then now we've got nothing. I could probably almost guarantee you that soon that will be houses out there. Yeah, from what I understand, and a quick Google will probably tell you the guy who's bought that is a housing developer. So everyone talks about how it's slated for motorsport use only. I mean, you know, don't want to be too conspiratorial, but you know, I'm sure that sort of a law will get changed pretty quickly too when the state government realises how many houses will be there. You know, for stamp duty alone, like, you know, you're talking probably tens of millions of dollars in that sort of a sense. So, and Adelaide's just growing as well. So for people who aren't from Adelaide, the Speedway City used to sort of be on the outskirts of the city, and now it's, you know, I think to the CBD you're probably looking at like a you know, like a half an hour drive, which is now considered close to the city. It used to be a long way out, but yeah, obviously Adelaide's no longer the 20-minute city. It probably hasn't been for about 20 years if you've been serious about it. So that land out there is you know, there's another suburb that's been built not too far away from it that's just huge, and it's, you know, that sort of, Adelaide's growing out in every sort of direction. Obviously stuff like up in the hills is just huge, and then, you know, everything south is just, you know, Aldinga used to be like a country town, and now there's just houses all the way out there, and that's happening out the north side of the city too, like out to Gawler, which is like sort of on the Speedway City side. So yeah, I mean, not to say that it was never going to not happen anyway, but yeah, I mean, like that, whatever did go on there with that sort of promoting stuff, we no longer have it anyway. Yeah, it might have ended up there anyway. But yeah, we probably didn't do anything to help ourselves there either. That's the other thing. So that's sort of where I was going with that. That's obviously someone who I'm working on speaking with is Wendy Turner. She was the promoter out there. Obviously, yeah, she's got her own stuff going on too. So that's one of the people that is lined up. Just when the time suits her. I probably feel like I probably don't. Not probably. I do feel like a dickhead for how much I've sort of harped on trying to get her with the phone calls and stuff like that. Yeah, so hopefully when she's ready, we'll sit down, and I'm really looking forward to that. I've got another bunch lined up too. It's just, yeah, like I was saying, just timing. There's probably only a handful of guys in Australia who do speedway for a living, so everyone else is working regular jobs and working on cars in their own time and all that sort of stuff. So yeah, once time's sort of permitting, and yeah, if I'm being honest too, the podcast will probably start sort of thinning out sort of from here on in as well until, maybe till the end of the season, just because, yeah, obviously I'm planning on sort of roaming around, and everyone else is sort of out racing, and people are working on cars now during the week, and yeah, it's probably just going to thin out a little bit. Yeah, I don't know. Sometimes I start thinking about, like, maybe I stuffed up by putting a podcast out each week. It's just sort of what I wanted to do. I sort of just got a bit too sort of trigger happy in the beginning and started putting them out. But yeah, sometimes I sort of think like, oh shit, if I did them every fortnight, there'd be like 30 weeks worth of content there. So yeah, I was pretty lucky when I went to Melbourne, and I managed to smash out 3 in one weekend there. So that sort of saved me from not having a break. Yeah, I was lucky enough. Andy Pearce hooked me up with 2 there with Zoe and Caleb Mills. Yeah, and then obviously Donna's. I think Donna's is actually flying to America today. I think. And so yeah, I was probably lucky that they didn't start sort of thinning out back then as well. So yeah, I know from my point of things, like, I absolutely bust my ass to try and get people to talk to. I know some of the older guys that I've sort of spoken to, they probably don't not necessarily understand what a podcast is. They sort of just don't realise that we're just going to sort of sit down and have a chat, and yeah, they sort of... So yeah, trying to explain to some of those guys like what it is and stuff like that. Yeah, it's... But yeah, I'm doing everything that I can to sort of create as much content as possible. There's just so many people that I want to speak to, and I'm not with like no disrespect, I'm not fussed as to who I sort of talk to either. I mean, I do have a list of people that I don't want to speak to, but yeah, there's just so many people that I want to speak to. Like, obviously the drivers are always going to be more popular because there's sort of, to some degree, more of them in the game, sort of thing. But it's never that I never not wanted to talk to like engine builders or chassis builders or anything like that, or promoters or anything like that. Sort of want to talk to everyone in the game. I really, really, really want to speak to someone who preps a track, because yeah, like it's a stupidly hot topic in Speedway. Just to see what goes on, because like I don't know myself what goes into prepping a track. I know that obviously they start doing stuff to them the week of a meeting. I have my assumptions as to what goes on, but yeah, I could be wrong. So yeah, I really want to talk to someone who preps a track. There's just so many people involved in the sport that, yeah, so yeah, and there's obviously some other people too who I'd really like to speak to as well, but obviously their positions within the industry, it's probably not great for them to sit down and talk, and they probably can't say what they want to say either, which is fine. I totally respect that. probably everyone that's been on probably hasn't sort of necessarily been able to say exactly what they want, kind of thing. Yeah, I know that I sort of try to run the middle ground with a lot of the stuff that I'm sort of asking and talking. Obviously, sort of being involved in the sport as long as I have, there's certain things and stuff like that too. So yeah, and it's just sort of stuff that can't be spoken about publicly. Yeah, it's a bit of a tricky one. So yeah, hopefully I can speak to someone who's prepped the track. Really like to speak to a current promoter or a former promoter. Talk to a bunch of the older guys who sort of have come through like the heyday of Speedway. Yeah, I can't think of the name. I should have had the name written down. There's someone on YouTube who's like uploaded a shitload of videos from like Speedway Park back in the day, and you just look at the crowd there in like the late 80s, early 90s, and you're just like, man, where have those days gone? So yeah, it's just yeah, I don't know. Especially being from Adelaide too, if you ever had the opportunity to go to Speedway City on Boxing Night for World Series kickoff, man, you'll know what I'm talking about. Like, those nights were just like absolutely electric. Like, even when World Series would come back through Adelaide on the way to Perth, those nights weren't as big, even though it was still a World Series night. It was just, there had to have been so many people that just went there because that was just what they did on Boxing Night. They just went to the Speedway on Boxing Night. So, I understand that we're always going to have those kinds of events and stuff like that too, but, I mean, even if you could get, like, 75% of that crowd there every night. I know there's other nights there at Speedway City as well, like the Jack Daniels night. That was always huge. It was just one of those events that sort of happened, and, yeah. And that's probably the other thing too that like I've spoken about is like there's events in Speedway that aren't necessarily about the racing. Like I said to Daryl the other week, the racing at the Classic, as far as the actual sprint car feature itself, anywhere in the country the next weekend, the sprint car feature, more than likely would have been just as good. It's just the event that the Classic is, and I'm not taking anything away from the Classic here whatsoever. It's just trying to get people to see that sort of racing can go on week in, week out kind of thing is, it's one of the tricky things trying to introduce people to it. So, yeah, obviously I'm a diehard with it through and through, and, so, yeah, hopefully, I'm just trying my best to try and grow this platform as much as I can and bring the views in and talk to as many people as possible. There's a few people that I've said I wanted to speak to, and other people have been like, geez, why do you want to speak to them? But sort of, want to hear their side of the story on things, or, I sort of think, there's not too many things. Like, if something's your point of view, then, like, that's your point of view with it. I'm not going to shoot you down with it or anything like that, or I'm sort of one of the people who, like, if I see something I don't like, I can keep scrolling past it. There's we've sort of grown into people who, if you see something you don't like, you've got to speak up about it, which to me is not, I'm not really one for that. There's obviously topics and stuff like that I 100% disagree on, but yeah, that doesn't mean that I don't think you should have your minute to speak about sort of things. Like, yeah, it's probably, back to one of the reasons as to why I started all this as well. So, yeah, obviously this one's a weird episode, no guest, just me, myself and I. Hopefully it gives a bit more insight into what I'm trying to do here and grow it, and yeah, it's a bit of a struggle, I'm not going to lie. Trying to get everything done, still working a full-time job, trying to travel around as much as possible. Obviously the financial stuff too, like, if you're to put it into like layman's terms, I'm like a full budget racer. It's just, and I don't know that everyone is facing like just these costs of living and stuff like that too. You know, that's probably one of the things that's a worry too with racing, is knowing what the cost of like diesel is and stuff like that too. Like, I mean, I'd hate to know what it costs to get some of these trucks around to the events, let alone, you know, what it costs to run a sprint car or anything for that matter. You know, I know that everyone's sort of hurting, kind of thing. So, you know, generally, sometimes when things historically have been in this sort of position, entertainment sort of grows. You know, it sort of helps people take their minds off things and stuff like that too. So, yeah, yeah, I'm not claiming to, you know, be poor or anything like that. You know, it's just, yeah, I'm not in a position to spend, you know, like a couple of grand just to fly to Sydney and do a podcast with someone. So, sort of got to choose all that sort of stuff pretty wisely at the moment. You know, hopefully this starts making enough money that it's just going to pay for itself. It's pretty much the ultimate goal. Sort of, if it does get to the point where it's making profit, I sort of said to myself from the get-go, I want to be putting that back into the racing. Like, you know, I'm not too fast. If it's making $50 profit, I want to sponsor a hard charger event for the night or something like that. It just, as long as it's sort of paying for itself and I can keep doing those sorts of things, then yeah, that's ultimately where I sort of want to get it at. Obviously know that it's not going to sort of ever become a full-time job, sort of as much as I'd like it to. It's just, the sport's probably not big enough in Australia to do it. Like, for in America or something like that, you could probably make a go of it. But, yeah, it's just, yeah, I sort of know where I'm realistic on all that sort of stuff. So, yeah, I don't know, it's probably stupid in some sense starting all of this in one way. But yeah, it's a passion. It's no different to anyone who goes out racing. I actually had a good conversation with someone on the phone the other day who's hopefully coming on soon, and they were talking about the costs of racing in the current state of things and stuff. And you know, he said himself, you know, the reality is he's stupid enough to do it. It's what they want to be doing, so no one's forcing them to go racing in any form or sense. And I'm no different. I'm the one choosing to spend all my spare time and do this, and you know, the nights editing and all that sort of stuff. And yeah, hopefully coming up this summer, we're on the road quite a fair bit from sort of like the tentative schedule that we've got. There's a lot of cool racing happening, especially sort of down south between that sort of like Mount Gambier across the Warrnambool. A lot of cool stuff happening across there. So I'm hoping I can cover most of it. Hoping to get up to sort of Sydney and stuff like that too, and then sort of see what we can do schedule wise, and obviously financially as well. Try and get up to Toowoomba. That I've watched a fair few nights on that from Clay Per View, and yeah, hopefully I can get up there because that place looks sick. They got a lot of money going into the purse up there this year. So I think you'll see a lot of big names there. Got no idea what's sort of happening in terms of like Americans who are coming out to Australia this year. That stuff's probably like maybe a couple more weeks away from guys sort of announcing. So, you know, depending on what's happening, all that sort of stuff, that sort of might make a bit of a difference to where we're sort of like heading and going and stuff like that too. Obviously, you know, you'd say from assumptions, the kind of money that's on the line in and around that sort of like Toowoomba, you'd assume some guys who are bringing out Americans will probably race around there. You know, there's a lot of money up there in the modified sedans, and then I know down south too, between like, I think like Horsham and Simpson and Portland and stuff like that too, they got another shitload of money on for modified sedans as well. So yeah, I've got some stuff planned in around that. Obviously, sort of trying to toss up too between what we do with Pro Speed Car Week. Just, you know, back to the financials of doing that, and then heading over to the Classic as well. Yeah, that's probably stretching the budget a fair bit there, I'd say. Obviously, yeah, I would do it. I'll do it, but yeah, end up living in the car kind of thing. So just trying to be smart with it all. And I probably don't want to get burnt out on all of this sort of stuff either. I want to keep it going. So yeah, that's probably sort of where we're at with all of that at the minute. So hopefully, yeah, we're out on the road a lot. I don't really know where the content might end up leading with all of that. I sort of have the idea of like what I want it to look like and do. But yeah, we'll just sort of see where it leads. I know there's a few guys have reached out to do some sort of different sort of stuff than what's sort of currently out there on across the platforms. Obviously, there's a pretty big pin in one of the places right now. But yeah, hopefully, like elsewhere, we can do it. There's a lot of content out there that you can grab within the whole sort of sport, but yeah, there's just, you got to sort of, it's a hard thing too, because the weirdest thing that I've seen, obviously, if you run a social media page or YouTube, you get so much data from it as well. So one of the things that I've seen, which is, it blows my mind, like I put those 30-second teaser clips up of the podcast on the Sunday and then the Wednesday when the podcast goes live, and people can't even watch them for like 10 to 14 seconds and then they're done. No, like very rarely do you get them being watched for their full length, but then the data that YouTube's showing me is that people are watching in full. So it's bizarre that, you know, people are watching, can't watch those clips, but then they're watching the YouTube in full. And I know that some guys have said to me too, like, oh, such and such is on. They don't watch the full clip on Instagram or Facebook. They'll just watch the whole clip on YouTube. So yeah, I know that there's probably like a little bit of that sort of stuff going on too. So yeah, I think just the hard thing is trying to garner people's attentions in full these days is so hard. Like me and Matt spoke about it too, like the power of, you know, we all have within our phones alone, let alone, you know, trying to sit people down. And, you know, if you've ever been to the movies recently, you'll see people's phones just glowing in the corner of your eye, something like that. And, you know, they're at the movies, they can't even sit there for 2 hours and watch a movie without grabbing their phone. So Speedway's got its own struggles within that as well. And then trying to create content that is people are going to sit there and watch is another hard thing in itself too. So, which is bizarre that people watch the podcast in full. So, you know, and then all the stuff that I see from the audio side of things too, the Spotify, stuff like that, like people are listening in full as well. I know for myself though, like that's probably a little bit easier because, you know, we've probably all put a podcast on and it just sort of plays in the background kind of things too. So I know all that sort of stuff happens. Obviously this is probably going to be like the biggest podcast that I've ever done. This will have the biggest views ever because it's myself. So yeah, I'll be able to dive into all that data and yeah, we'll go from there. So yeah, bit of a break in regular programming, I know, but hopefully we'll have some stuff teed up in the next week or so. I am going away for a weekend, so there's nothing going to happen there. So yeah, it might be a bit of a break for a week or two, and yeah, we should be back to sort of regular programming, and then yeah, sort of, I don't know, really don't know what's going to happen with it all. It's probably going to be a little bit hit and miss for the next sort of couple of months over the racing season. Obviously, would like to do a shitload of them when we're away and stuff like that, but just stuff like the Classic weekend, like it's going to be, you know, it's going to be super hard to do one with anyone that weekend because everyone's just so busy that weekend. Like even if you're not racing, there's stuff to be done with the car and the crew, or be at the track and watching and stuff like that too. So there's a few people have said to me like, oh, that's going to be a really good weekend for it, but sort of knowing what goes on team wise, that's not going to be a great weekend for it either. So yeah, it's probably going to be a little bit hit and miss from here on in, but I'll just keep plotting away at it and doing the best that I can with it all. And just to all the guys who have been supporting me, I don't want to individualise them all, sort of thing. Or they all know who I am. It's all the same bunch of little group of people. Their support has been just amazing with it. Yeah, they all know who they are. I can't thank them enough. Hopefully there's some stuff that I can get done with them coming up soon. Back to the whole travel thing, and I know that they're in the same boat as well. So yeah, hopefully just keep plodding away, and it just gets bigger and bigger. I know that that's just what's got to be done. It's not. I knew it wasn't ever going to be something overnight that just takes off. It surprised the hell out of me to see where it's gotten to already. So yeah, we'll just keep punching away at it and try and get it to where I can, kind of thing. And yeah, easy enough.